stop my sharing now. And so, Max, you can go ahead and share your screen whenever you're ready. And Karen, I'll just let you kick off the session.
Wonderful. Well, thank you again. We've got over 60 folks so far joining us today. We really appreciate your time to discuss our detecting cyber threats in real time. So a couple of housekeeping announcements before we do jump right in. My name's Karen Grossett, and I'm with Tyler Technologies. We really thank you for joining us today. GGFOA does need me to remind you that you have to be registered through the Institute of Government and all fees paid to be awarded CPE credits for this session. If you did obtain the link for today's session from someone else, there will not be a record in the Institute of Government's database to process your earned CPE, so please be aware of that. Also, if you look in the chat box, and if you go to the bottom of your screen, you'll see the chat and the Q&A. But in the chat box, I've got a couple of links. One is to the sponsor page. The other one is to the exhibitor page. And I have already gone ahead and put the link to the evaluation survey that we do hope you take time at the end of the session to fill out. So I think that is it for everything I did need to do for housekeeping. Hopefully you're all familiar at this point with being able to enter the chat and doing the Q&A. Please go ahead and feel free to pose questions throughout the session. I will try to answer them, and we are certainly going to leave time at the end for questions and answers as well. Oh, Denise, I know it says you can't see the links, but yeah, if you kind of hover in the window box, maybe like right over where the detecting cyber threat slide is, then the screen, you should have a little ribbon that pops up at the bottom, which will show Q&A and chat, etc. And I think offline, Melanie can help with some technical items as well. But I do want to go ahead and get started and introduce Max Green. He is a cybersecurity client experience consultant with us at Tyler Technologies. He's going to be discussing all sorts of tips and tricks and experiences that he has had to be able to spot cyber threats and become more savvy and aware of them. And nobody walks away from Max's presentations without some chuckles and without being thoroughly entertained. So you will certainly learn something today as well as be entertained. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Max. Thanks.
Thank you, Karen, and thank you everyone for joining me for detecting cyber threats in real time. I'm happy to be joining you guys today. My role, as Karen had said, is actually currently a cybersecurity awareness consultant. It changes all the time, but amongst that role, I also act as Tyler Technologies and the Tyler Cybersecurity team's lead social engineer. Under that role, I've worn many different hats, everything from an IT person to an electrician to a nurse to an elderly lady at times, hello, and a lot of different things in between, and you'll find out why as we go. But essentially, it's my job to study what the cyber criminals are doing and what the current threat landscape is, and then test institutions, sometimes acting as the cyber criminals. And again, we'll get into exactly why as we continue, but let's launch. So our learning objectives today. At the end of the session, our hopes are that you should be able to understand the current threat landscapes and who we are actually dealing with. We'll be able to realize what threats we need to be aware of as basic users, gain tools on how to better adapt and prepare against cybercriminal activity, and learn best practices. So we have to talk about the new normal, right? The new normal and what does it mean for us? For many of us, it meant working from home, right? Working remotely. There's just been a lot of chaos in these past 6 or so months with our COVID-19 environment. And, many of us kind of pictured, okay, working from home, hopefully we're in this idyllic situation. We can wake up and get our cup of coffee. And, now we don't have to commute and things will be so easy. However, the new normal for most of us looked a lot more like this, right? We had kids occupying our space. It meant no school. It meant no daycare. Spouses might have been working from home with us, so we're fighting over the good spots and the internet. We have roommates. We have family we're taking care of. And then on top of all of that, the amount of distractions that were just flooding us both with real information and false information, relevant to COVID or not, and all the while we really did realize, hey, we don't exactly know how to do all of our job functions from home. Things are different. How do we communicate with each other? What does this mean for us? So it's been a learning experience for all of us, and it also leaves us with a lot of questions of, are we working securely? How do we vet out the threats that have been even more accentuated because of our new environment? And we're going to just start with a question here right off the bat, which I believe are going to be the polling questions, which who is responsible for cybersecurity at your organization? A, administration, B, department heads, C, IT, or D, everyone? Give everyone a moment to respond to that. You should all see a poll popping up on your screen. Okay, so for answers, we have 4% administration. Nobody answered department heads. We have a lot of IT, and then most of us answered the correct answer, which is everyone, which is perfect. And that is because really, what we're talking about here is the internet environment. And the internet truly is a shared resource, and securing it is our shared responsibility. Now, of course, we do rely on IT and our managers to give us some guidance, but every single one of us has a role in securing their part of cyberspace, because all of us, for our organizations, are both our first line of defense, but also potentially our weakest link. Right? It doesn't matter how much technology or money we invest into security. If someone gives them a bad password or opens the door for them, well, then that's the show, right? So we all need to kind of have an understanding of what our responsibility is in this. And that's really systemic of our society, right? It takes us a long time with things that we invent to catch up to what's also the best practices or what keeps us safe. I love to think about cars in terms of how long they've been around, but and then you think about seatbelts in conjunction with cars. Seatbelts have been around since the 50s, but used to be they just were the harness seatbelt, the cut you in half seatbelt, and no one wore those, right? Mom was your seatbelt if you were sitting in the front seat, and she put her arm out in hopes you didn't go through the windshield. But over the years, they developed the harness seatbelt. People still didn't really wear that, but then they started saying, okay, everyone under a certain age needs to wear a seatbelt. Then they started saying, all right, everyone needs to wear a seatbelt. They've started ticketing people in most states if you're not wearing a seatbelt, until finally, in our 2020 environment, most of us have our mothers in our cars beeping at us until we put a seatbelt on, right? Our car will literally yell at us if our seatbelt isn't on. And that's because we know that wearing a seatbelt keeps us secure while driving our car. So can we start as a society to look at the internet and cyberspace in a similar manner? What should we know in terms of navigating safely? I want to talk to you about this concept called cyber resilience, right? The ability to prepare, plan for, absorb, and recover from, and more successfully adapt to adverse events. That's really my hope in this training and these takeaways, right? That cyber resilience is a large concept, but we need to know, what we should be looking for, what threats are out there, what best tools and tricks we can use to kind of start this process and continue to build a security culture amongst us. Right. Looking at cyber resilience, what does that really mean? Well, they break it down into these 4 things. Right. Adapt, so change in management approach or adjusting response strategies in advance of disruptive events and future events. Prepare, predict and anticipate and plan for potential threats. Withstand, so when or if these threats happen, are we ready to maintain business operations without performance degradation or loss of functionalities under these hazardous conditions? And then recover. Are we able to rebound and restore from adverse events to full business operations, performance, and functionalities? And we're really looking at this adapt and prepare piece as we go through this training today. This is one of my favorite slides. I've been using this slide for about 6 years as I've done trainings like this to users. And every year, the numbers go up astronomically. We can see it's 2020s every minute on the internet. And we look at this wheel just for a second, right? We see almost 800,000 hours of Netflix are watched every single minute. 4.1 million Google searches every single minute. 1.6 million Tinder swipes, right? We're lonely people every single minute. But really, it tells us so much just looking at this wheel. And first, I want to take a look at this quote. Every 2 days, we now create as much information as we did from the dawn of civilization up until 2003. Every 2 days, we're now creating that same amount of information. And that really just accentuates this idea that this is where we live our lives now. I would imagine that almost everyone on here probably uses 3 or more of these daily, if not weekly. But what else does it tell us? Well, it also shows us that, everything on here, when we're doing it, feels like very much a private experience, right? You're watching Netflix at home, or you're browsing Facebook on your phone, or you're sending your best friend or your spouse text messages. It feels very private. But again, the internet is that shared resource. And the reason we're able to track all these things is because it is a public space. But the other thing it tells us and brings to mind is the amount of A, information that we're putting out about ourselves, and B, potential attack vectors, right? That every single one of these could be taken advantage of by that actor to lure us into a pitfall of cybercrime. So we talk about cyber criminals and we conjure up these ideas of them. So let's get into who we're really dealing with. Maybe most of us think of this person, right? Sexy mullet dude down in mom's basement. We give him enough Red Bull and Cheetos, right? And enough computers, he's going to hack the CIA or the FBI or put some more money in your bank account, whatever it is. Or you might jump to this, right? These anonymous figures, usually in hoodies, right? These guys are somewhere deep in the matrix, even with masks, in front of the computers, because you're never going to know who these people are. The reality being, though, what the idea of cybercrime and these organizations have become really more looks like this. Right, full-on organizations that don't look all that different from our workplaces. They have CEOs, they have CFOs, they have HR departments, they have amazing customer service. And you call into these folks and say, hey, these guys will call into these folks and say, hey, we want to buy some ransomware, and ransomware as a service or malware as a service, and they will provide that to you and walk you through on how to launch it and how to use it. Now, we can't really stop there, right? But it's just important to know how big the machine really is. Either they're running their own campaigns or they're selling them to individuals like this. And we'll just go a step further, kind of just breaking down our adversaries as we know them. For starters, we have our insider. Right? Our insider is always going to be after financial gain. There's usually a grievance, and it's very targeted. It's targeted to the organization that they already have access to. Recently, we've been hearing more and more in headlines about one specific insider case that happened in Tesla, where an individual was offered $1 million or so to put Russian ransomware onto the Tesla network. Now, luckily, this insider came forward. They did not carry out the attack, but it just shows how vulnerable organizations can be to an insider like that. Then we have our hacker. We think of our hacker as our 15 to 25-year-old young men or women. They're really out there for bragging rights, right? They're opportunistic. They're scanning the web, seeing what they can gain access to, seeing where the holes are. Our best hope is that these guys grow up and want to become, cybersecurity specialists and not cyber criminals. But you're hearing more and more about them as well. I know that there was an example from Miami-Dade schools where, just kind of kids messing around were able to bring down a whole platform of, third-party hosted homework providers and things like this that we're working on. So it can definitely lead into cybercrime and disruption. Then we do have our cyber criminal, and we'll use cyber criminal and social engineer kind of interchangeably throughout this, but that'll really be our focus of our conversation today. our cyber criminal is after financial gain, and they are opportunistic, but that isn't to say that it's not targeted. Really, the best way to think about your cyber criminal on a whole level is imagine that we're all at a football game. And after we've enjoyed the tailgate together and the barbecue's over, we all go into the stadium and there's still 1,000+ cars out in the lot. And what you won't see is your average criminal walking up to one of those cars, looking in the window, seeing the forgotten Ray-Bans and car stereo, and smashing the window to gain access, right? No, because that would cause a lot of noise. They're very likely to get caught in that case. What you're more likely to see is the criminal walking around and trying every car door. And the car door that didn't get the beep fob pressed on the way into the game that's unlocked, well, that's going to become the target, right? The target was the whole football game, but the car that was unlocked is the one that it really becomes the victim. And now they can just very smoothly take whatever was in the car and be unnoticed. Right? Cyber criminals working in a very similar way. They're sending out 1,000 phishing emails, 1,000 SMS text messages, 1,000 robocalls in hopes of being given entry easily, being given a yes, being given a password, so that they can enter unwittingly. Then we have our cyber hacktivists. We won't really talk about them much, but it's just good to know who they are and what they're about. These are groups like Anonymous. They've gone after large companies like Sony or governments or even individuals. They have a grievance. It's very targeted, and they're looking for social wrongdoing. And then lastly, cyber terrorists. Now, I used to say in these trainings, cyber terrorism is really too big of a conversation for us. But as we know from our headlines, it's really not true, right? Because so many of these, ransomware as a service type organizations like this are backed by nation states, or we'll hear that a ransomware has been tied to Iran or another type country, again with the goal of disruption and terrorism, really at a global level. Now, when we talk about this, we're not talking about political warfare alone, because that is also cyber terrorism, right? Every nation with a laptop has been going after another, and it's very targeted. But they're really entering our conversation in terms of cybercrime to fund cyber terrorism. So what? What should we be aware of? What do we need to know about? What are these threats? Well, first of all, we can't even talk about these threats without getting into social engineering. Right? And social engineering is the action of exploiting human nature rather than the technical hacking techniques to gain access to systems, data, or buildings. Now, why? Why would the cyber criminals utilize social engineering? Well, it's really simple, right? They can, sit down in hopes of hacking their way in through vulnerabilities and, hoping that the hardware we've invested in, doesn't hold up. Or they can go the easy way, right? They can send a bunch of phishing emails or try to walk right through the front door. And, this way, the rigmarole doesn't take them a long time. They just go right to the end game. So that's why social engineering is utilized and deployed. Ransomware is just something we need to touch on. It has become the most popular and talked about type of malware. Malware being just malicious software. But ransomware is malicious software that allows hackers to access an individual or company's computers and then encrypt sensitive data and then demand some sort of payment to decrypt it. Now, this has also evolved and escalated. It used to be that ransomware was just encrypting files. Now it's even potentially exfiltrating files. So, even if you don't pay that ransom, they already have your files and they're selling that information to the dark web or on the side. And this can be life-threatening. There have been so many examples of this. Most recently, a very large hospital, I believe in California, that was literally brought down because of ransomware, and that meant no access to patient files and important machinery no longer worked. But this could be just as much of a problem in small cities or small towns with can lead to 911 dispatching being offline, and all of these things that we utilize as lifelines are being disrupted. So it's why it's so important for us to kind of be aware that ransomware is a thing and that it's out there. Now, ransomware and things in that nature are often deployed via social engineering methods. Now, methods that we're familiar with probably are email phishing, right? So posing as a legitimate business or service. Vendor spoofing, so posing as a vendor on a service call, either showing actually up at the building to gain access to the building, or via remotely. ITIS spoofing, or what we call network pretexting, so posing as an internal IT or information security department staff or someone working closely with them to gain information about the network or gain a password or whatever that the goal may be. Website spoofing, which is the creation of phony websites that appear to be legitimate. This has become increasingly popular with cheap website templates and the ability to buy SSL certificates to make it look legitimate. I'm constantly hearing about fake World Health Organization websites or fake CDC websites, and that started really right off the bat as COVID and quarantine became a thing. Then we have phone spoofing, which is literally the manipulation of caller ID, so the ability to appear as anyone you want to be on that caller ID. And then charity scamming is another big one. So looking for financial support for fake charities, or and trying to get people to click by preying on their goodwill and their support of other, of just human nature in general. A couple things that didn't make this list, but we'll touch on: USB baiting. USB baiting is this idea of leaving a USB or mailing a USB out under false pretenses. Maybe it says something like payroll doc or 2020 budget cuts, whatever it is, or Finding Nemo 3, just in hopes of getting someone to plug that into their machine unwittingly, bringing down malware. Also, SMS text message fraud and so many other methods, and more evolving on a regular basis. So the question becomes, though, as we're all sitting here, we're like, well, and given that we know about so many of these methods, a lot of us do, why does this work? And it comes down to the psychology of risk awareness, right? Why doesn't this feel risky? And it's because at one point, all of us are either every single one of these things or one of these things, right? Starting with the availability heuristic. If you can't recall a specific instance of this happening, it just doesn't feel risky. If you've never experienced a social engineering attack or the fallout from clicking on a phishing email or anything of that nature, then you don't have anything to call on, right? If your identity's never been compromised, etc. Then we have our optimism bias folks. These are my favorite people, right? They're the bad things only happen to others. Of course, we just know that's not true, and they're really the first people that the cyber criminals would go after, right? Their trusting nature makes them the ultimate targets. But these are the people that are going to click on every email, give out whatever information over the phone, let anybody into the building, because bad things are going to happen to other people. Then we have our level of control folks, right? This is the, well, Max, this problem is too big. I have no control over what happens. And I empathize with that. I really do, especially, in about 10 minutes into the presentation, we've already talked about all of our adversaries and the machine that is cybercrime and ransomware and kind of the scary nature of the world right now. And it's easy to say, whoa, like, if they want my information, they're going to get in anyway. But the reality is, and what's important for us to hang on to, is if I sent 5 of you right now listening a phishing email, and the first 4 of you deleted that email or don't click on the link or don't respond at all, well, you've stopped that attack in its tracks. Right? It very much becomes a 1-for-1, and you as the user have shut that down. So we need to remember that it is in our control and not to be so overwhelmed by the idea of cybercrime. Then we have our risk homeostasis folks. These are the I'm so used to the level of risk, it will either need to be raised or lowered dramatically for me to re-engage. My favorite example of this is I had a client years ago that had enlisted us to do some network pretexting, so calling in as their help desk because they had experienced some incidents and they wanted to make sure people knew what to do if that were to happen. Now, unfortunately for them, everyone that I requested information of gave me information or visited the site I wanted to, and so management's response was, okay, they didn't do very well, so we're going to test them every single month. Well, we began doing that. And again, they actually were undergoing real attacks while we were doing that. And every one of the employees decided to stop answering the phone. They just simply weren't going to engage anymore, right? These are customer service people not answering the phone anymore. And it wasn't until we introduced this idea of a code word that IT would send out securely daily and would need to be given before anything happened over the phone, that they would even begin to pick up their phone again. Right? These are the Walden Pond folks. They want to just unplug their computer and their phone and be done with it. But again, unfortunately, it's just not the world that we live in. And then lastly, groups and social norms. The simple idea of I don't want to be ostracized by my coworkers or friends. I don't want to be made fun of because I didn't click on the email. I don't want to, not hold the door open for someone even if we have badge doors, right? Because I don't want to get, picked on or criticized. But we need to kind of get away from that as a society, as we mentioned from the very beginning, right? We need to be building a security culture and feel comfortable with that, because it's not just to protect us or to protect our organizations, but to protect our communities and ultimately our national infrastructure. So it's no surprise that phishing and scams are on the rise during this time. And I want to ask and bring up another poll. Have you ever encountered a phishing email? A, yes, B, no, C, don't know.
Hey, Max, while
Yes.
everyone fills out the polling question, I've had a lot of requests that they can't see your face. If you could turn your video back on, I think that would make a lot of people happy.
Sure. I usually just turn it off, guys, because the slides are more important than my face. But here I am. Hello, everyone. All right. So we have 94% yes have encountered a phishing email. So we all know on here, just the probability of that alone. So that's why we're going to lead to this next section, and I think the most important, right? The ability to be recognizing what this fraud looks like and how to know. This is one of my favorite examples of phishing email that came out of 2019. It was, I think, the most popular, and I'm sure it continued to be so well into 2020, right? This is an email from Netflix. Your account has been suspended. We look closely. It says, "Dear Netflix, we are sending this email to let you know that your credit card has been expired, and to update your account information, please visit your account," in hopes of you clicking on this link, and you'll be whisked away to a Netflix looking page, and you'll put in your credit card information. Now, of course, we could nitpick at this, right? For starters, it says "Dear Netflix," and that's weird. At the very least, you could say "Dear Customer." But there's so many types of emails like this, and they're these account-based emails. And the easiest thing we can do is to simply log directly into our account, right? If this was true and we went to log into Netflix at www.netflix.com and we navigated there independently, then it's going to tell us, hey, your account has been suspended, update your information. This would be true of Dropbox or Gmail or whatever it is. We can visit that account. If you get something from your financial institution, call your financial institution, right? We never have to fall for these. Now, that said, and additionally, if we were to hover over this link, it's going to tell us, it's going to show up in the corner or right below it, where we're visiting. And I can guarantee you it's not going to read Netflix.com. This one's a little bit easier because it's marked up like my third grade paper, but it tells us everything we need to know also. All right, we've received an email from Bank of America. Okay, well, let's look. It says up top it is from Bank of America. When we look closer, the sender is crbdgi@comcast.net. And then we look at who it's being sent to. Well, it's not just being sent to us, but to undisclosed recipients. So probably us and a million blind seed folks. Then we look at the actual email itself. Okay, we messed up a little bit here with the capitalization, but we could forgive that. Then it asks us, okay, please sign into your account. And here's where I get tripped up. It says https://www.bankofamerica.com. Well, I know that to be the actual link for Bank of America, right? That's where I would go if I was trying to navigate to it. But again, if we were to just hover over this link and not click on the link, what we're going to see is that it's actually sending us here, right? http://bit.do/blah, blah, right? We're never going to go anywhere near Bank of America. All they're going to have done is successfully phished our credentials for our online banking. So it's just so important to be using mindful use and to be slowing down and looking for these clues. Other examples that we saw more recently in our COVID time are things like DocuSign credential harvesting, right? So many things were changing, different, workplace rules and procedures and things with insurance. So this was incredibly successful. WHO guidelines against coronavirus, sign to download the instructions. Now, opening this up could bring malware down to your machine. Also, it's going to prompt you to put in your credentials, and we're all going to assume they're our workplace credentials, right? If we've ever used DocuSign internally. Again, what do we do here? Well, looking at the sender, is that somebody we recognize? Does it make sense? Have we heard anything about this prior? We don't need to just follow these emails that we receive. We can do more, right? As users, we could say, oh, well, this isn't from HR. Let me ping someone from HR and make sure this is real. And right then, we would have stopped this phishing attempt in its tracks. I put this phishing quiz up. It's a free phishing quiz from Google. You're all about to learn a rule from me that's going to tell you, do I trust this link or not? And I understand that completely. I can tell you this is a real link. Google has partnered with this quiz making group, and it's an 8-question either real phishing email or legitimate or non-legitimate email. So I just encourage everyone to go and take it, especially after this training, and we've learned some rules, and see how you do. It's just a great example of real-life emails that you might get, and I'm confident that most of you will get 100 out of 100 if you're paying attention and you're using mindful use and follow the rules we learn. So that brings us right into website spoofing. You can see here it is trying to convince us that we are at Chase, right? It says Chase Online customer satisfaction survey right on top. It says Chase here, it says Chase Online there, chase.com. I'm convinced, right? But if we were to look at the actual address bar, we see that we're at http www.5starmanager.com/chaseonline.chase.com. And I want to teach everybody a really important rule, and that is the first /2 rule, because that is always going to tell you where you are actually navigating to. In any link that's sending you somewhere, if you look for the first / and 2 dots back, that will tell you definitively where you are. And in this case, if we follow that rule, first / 2 dots back, we know that we really are just at 5starmanager.com. Now, why does it say chaseonline.chase.com? These are just folder names designed to confuse us and to mislead us into trusting that we really are at chaseonline.com. Just going a step further, because it really is such a great rule, looking at our first / 2 dots back, now knowing that again, everything after it doesn't matter, but also that everything before it doesn't matter. I oftentimes will test organizations and try to direct them to websites, and I'll put something in front of it, like Tyler Tech or Government Pro or anything I want, right? covidwatch.vsgcloud.com. But this is nothing, right? It all comes down to this / 2 dots back. We're really only at vsgcloud.com. One more time for those visual learners in the group, it's telling us www.aa.airlinemembers.com/sheets/us. But really, where are we? We are just at airlineaamembers.com, going by our first / 2 dots back. Other things that we just need to be aware of as we're navigating, things that cybercriminals are adopting are international domain name system abuse. You can see here in this little chart, these are all different ways to write www.Bank of America with different letters from not our alphabet, but other languages' alphabets, primarily the Russian alphabet. And some of these look pretty darn close, right? And if we were making quick moves, as most of us are throughout our day, and clicking on all the links and see it quickly, would we take enough time to say, hey, something looks off about this? The other thing is the hyperlink display name. Again, what we're showing here, it says www.Bank of America, but you're really being sent here, right? And they're able to do that just through Windows tools. We don't like long, clunky URLs. We do like to click here. So they can simply do display name as www.goodplace.com, but where we're really going, www.badplace.com. Then I mentioned bad sites with SSL certificates. SSL certificates are when we see an HTTPS and then the lock in the corner, which we don't see here, so we know that that's probably not a legitimate site. That said, it's becoming more and more popular for the cybercriminals to pay for that certificate, and maybe some parts of the site are safe and legitimate, but you might navigate to somewhere where it is not. And then again, using cheap website templates to really appear as if they are a legit site, not just having that static page, but also having an about page and a resource page and a news page. And then, of course, in any of these situations, whether it's from a website or from an email, we always want to be aware of any attachments we receive or download, as these attachments could be malicious and could bring down malware on software onto our devices. So you have to ask yourself, am I expecting this? Does this work into my work function? Do I normally get things like this? And really be going the extra mile before we're just bringing down attachments. Just speaking a little bit more to specific COVID targeted fraud, something that we were really all affected by and we felt throughout the nation was this aggressive unemployment fraud that was carried out, spearheaded by this group called Scattered Canary. They were quite literally going to different states' unemployment portals and filling out the information for anyone that they had already had compromised information from previous breaches, like our Equifaxes or our Capital Ones or our Walmart or our Target or our Home Depots, right? We've had so many over time. Our information is out there. Anthem. And so, they had all that. They had a large database of this information of social security numbers and mother's maiden names and the information that they needed to just go and sign up for these portals. And then they provided direct deposit account numbers and oftentimes set up bank accounts in these people's names unbeknownst to them. And then, of course, had to figure out a way to get that money from those bank accounts to themselves through utilizing classic romance scams on Craigslist or on any of the online dating sites that we hear about, and just taking advantage through different methods of the amount of people out of work and desperate for any money-making possibilities. So they were very successful in this scam. Social media scams have absolutely been on the rise. I mean, especially in a world where we are practicing social distance for the most part. And, we're communicating through these platforms probably more than ever, or getting on these platforms if we weren't already before. And when it comes to social media, and really all of these are true kind of throughout any platform that we might utilize, but remembering to be mindful and not absentmindedly clicking around. Don't click on things you don't trust, whether that's a message from someone you don't speak to often, or even a close friend that seems odd, or even those advertisements that feel like they are absolutely speaking directly to you. Now, the advertisements might have been vetted, but when you click on that advertisement, where does it bring you? Are you now on some website hosted out of China, and it's putting in your credit card information, and is this really a safe site? Really understanding that we need to carefully manage our security and privacy settings, using multi-factor when available. Multi-factor being that idea of typing in your credentials and then being prompted to put in another layer, put in a 6-digit code that's usually sent to you via text message. So that idea of not just locking your car door, but also enabling the car alarm. Be skeptical of friend requests, especially if you already have this person as a friend. And that really comes out of, again, because people don't carefully manage their security and privacy settings, folks are able to see a lot of information about individuals. And what they'll do is if they're able to see a friend list and all of the kind of in-depth information about a person, and it's all public facing, well, then they might copy this person's profile down to a T and then start friending their friends as them for malicious purposes. So, if you didn't really want to be friends with them the first time, don't need to be friends with them twice. If it's someone we care and know about, follow up with them. Reach out through a different medium. Hey, did you really mean to do this? Do you really have multiple accounts? Some people do, but it's worth following up on. Understanding how your information is shared and your identity used. I mean, so many of us just kind of join the platform, right? I bet if we had made a poll question of how many of you have actually ever read a full user agreement for an application or a social media platform, many of us would have to say no, right? TikTok was a great example of this, to the point where it's now banned. We're not allowing people to download it anymore because we were just so unaware of the access that it was being given and the things that about us and our phone that it was actually sharing. Then this idea of just don't put your whole life out there. It's such a hard thing to say in our kind of current landscape, as we do things for the likes and show our grandparents how our kids are doing from afar and everything in between, and we want to brag about our vacations. But doing so in a just a smarter way. Thinking about it as like the 1 hour photo. If we go on vacation, great, but let's wait till we get back to share that information. Leading right into turn off location services for social media, especially photographs. Two examples of these things, or one great example of these things combined, was as COVID started, I was seeing so many people share photographs of their work from home setup. And, oh, look, I've made a little nook, and here are all the machines, and here are my, different monitors, which was great. But thinking about, what information does that give the cyber criminal? Right? It's letting them know, exactly where you are, the devices that you're using. It's giving them a lot of information that could potentially bring us down or be harmful towards us. And then just this idea of changing our passwords at least twice a year. And that should be true really for everything, right? From our online banking to our social media accounts, just, for the security of it. And then lastly, closing accounts you don't use, right? If you found love on Match.com, don't keep it open just in case. Because for the same reason, we want to be skeptical of friend requests. We don't want to leave an account open that we're not monitoring that could potentially be used maliciously against us or as us. Also, we want to be recognizing SMS text message fraud. This one is so popular. I usually get maybe 6 of these a day. I wake up to them in the morning. I go to sleep with them at night. Everything from in the early times of COVID, it was click here to get your additional stimulus, or click here to get your $500 Amazon reward plus receive your package and know where it is, right? Again, remembering kind of following that same rules we would with that Netflix email. Reach, if it's saying that it's coming from an account we care about, visit that account. Don't follow these links, right? These links are clearly not going to anything that we trust. We're also seeing now more and more we'll get them in group messages. And this is really just a way for the bad actors to get it to an even larger audience. So really we want to be skeptical of this. Here it says, it's from our bank. Now, I do understand that a lot of us do have fraud alerts and things like that in place. And sometimes we might get these things from our bank or our financial institutions. But again, call your bank, reach out to your bank, visit that, and ask yourself, does this make sense? If you just got if you went to use your Capital One card and your your card was declined, and then you get this message, okay, that makes sense in context. But if you get this message out of nowhere, well, it's probably unlikely to be true. And again, there's still a different way to follow up with that in a safer way. People often ask me, Max, what could we do about these types of things? Well, and unfortunately, we can't end them, right? People will continue to do these smishing messages. They're very hard to shut down. It's very hard to get our number completely off of a list of, to never receive this type of fraud again. But we can all do our part. And if we receive them, we can send them to 7726, which spells spam, which allows our cell phone carriers to identify the senders of the smishing messages and take steps to limit the messaging. Or also file a complaint with the Federal Trade Commission or the FCC, as these agencies are there to enforce the laws regarding scam calls and text messages.
Hey, Max.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt, but you said, you get a lot of questions, and I had one pop up, come through on the chat, or the Q&A, I should say, and actually 2 now. First one, can malware be unintentionally downloaded on a cell phone?
So, it definitely can, but the way that our phones are created, it's usually less impactful. But that said, it is always a good idea to download, any antivirus type thing. There's a lot of like AT&T has their own clients. I think Verizon has a solution which will kind of constantly monitor both the network environment that your phone is connecting to, as well as have antivirus on your phone and monitor things on your phone. So great to utilize that, and gives you some insight and awareness. Also important to be kind of always following the updates, and when they push for updates, those, consider those just like in our office environment. When our IT pushes out patches, that is AT&T and Verizon saying, hey, we've noticed some vulnerabilities. We're not just giving you the new fun emojis. We're also protecting where there might have been potential for threats. So make sure that you're kind of staying up to date with those as well. And lastly, I would say that malicious things really come from, and we don't want to just kind of consider it malware, right? Because it's not always just malware that's being downloaded, but it could be keyloggers that are being brought down, or things that have, again, enough permissions within your phone that they're able to see text messages or see what you're typing in sites, and that typically comes from applications. So really being cautious of the applications that we bring down onto our phones, making sure that those are vetted, and not just kind of willy-nilly bringing down free apps, because oftentimes that's where these kind of bad actors are getting into our phone systems. Which leads us really right to the power of the spoof call as well. I know many of us have probably even gotten a call from ourselves, and that is really tempting, right? What if this is our Back to the Future moment, and we're trying to call ourselves and warn ourselves about 2020, right? You really want to take that call. So tell yourself right now that you'll leave a message, but know that these scammers have taken advantage of caller ID. Caller ID was invented to give us inherent trust of who we were talking to on the phone. That is no longer, right? They can call into your business phone and show up as a vendor you recognize, or they can call your cell phone and pop up as your mother or your father or your husband or your children. So it is a very powerful tool. And it's why all the more we really need to be making sure who we're talking to, but not just trusting what the caller ID tells us these days. One really popular scam that we're seeing is if you're working with a client or someone that you do typically ask authentication questions to make sure you know who you're talking to, is oftentimes, especially with financial institutions, what the bad actor is doing is calling your bank and being asked, those kind of typical questions of, when's the last time you used your account, your mother's maiden name, your social security number. Again, hopefully things we're getting away from. And as those are being asked, the person that's called in is also talking to the customer and doing yep, and now just for security reasons, I need to get this information, and then relaying it back. So that's just kind of one thing that the bad actors have been able to utilize through phone spoofing, because they can make it appear like they're calling as that person, and then also like they're calling as the bank, and utilizing both. So best practices and staying secure. For starters, right, coming right off that, just verifying who you're speaking to. This idea of getting a verification question. If you haven't had dinner with this person, if this person isn't your best friend, do you really know if you're talking to them? If they're a customer, if they're a client, if they're a vendor? What types of questions are we asking to make sure that that's who we're talking to? One of the best things we can do is, if we receive a call from someone, is saying, hey, can I quickly call you back? And then Googling that number or utilizing that number that we have on file to make sure it's really who we're talking to. But also this idea of, every call coming down to, and especially in terms of social engineering, everything is a puzzle piece, right? And that any information we give out without verifying who we're talking to can build a profile, even if they're yes or no questions, right? Someone calls in and says, hey, is this the phone number you have on file? And you say yes, but don't know who you're talking to. They might be able to just check a box and say, okay, I now know this is a good number to be pretending to have, or whatever it is. But flip it also, someone calls in as your IT person, and all you hear initially on the phone is, hey, I'm calling from IT, and you launch right into, oh, good, are you calling about the secure email issue? Well, now that person is armed with that information, and the calls that they'll make for the rest of the day might have to do with the secure email issue. Then just, again, getting this idea of rising security and customer service to the same level, right? We don't currently do that. Customer service is king. And that doesn't matter if we're working out of a municipality or a hospital or a bank or whatever it is. that's just what it is. The customer is right. We try to engage them in a friendly and customer-friendly manner. But we need to be comfortable introducing security measures into that, asking verification questions, telling people when we simply can't do something over the phone because it's not secure. We can't make certain changes, without another layer of verification. And just kind of bringing those two things to an even keel, security and customer service. Because again, as we've already echoed, it really isn't just for our organizations. It's not just for our cities, our towns, but for our citizens, for our customers, and ultimately again for our national infrastructure to protect both sides of the fence. And then lastly, this idea of the shared secret. Trying not to rely on just the birth date or the mother's maiden name or the last four of the social, because we have seen through examples of the unemployment fraud and other COVID-esque scams and other things over the years that is compromised. So how do we get to a cultural shift where we're asking questions that really, the vendor will know, or the client will know, or the customer will know? Ways to kind of stop most of these social engineering attempts and cybercriminal attempts in their tracks. Can I call you back, right? Especially if it's a phone spoof. They don't own that number, right? So can I call you back? Asking yourself, did I initiate this? Example being, if you called the IRS and the IRS says, can I have the last four of your social? Absolutely, you called the IRS. But if the IRS calls you and asks for the last four of your social, no way, right? You never give that to them. Do I know who I'm speaking to? Can you really be confident who you're speaking to? If the answer is no, hang up, right? Am I expecting this? And that comes in terms of those phishing emails. Does this make sense? If I just got free tickets to a Patriots game, why did I do that? Did I actually enroll in something? Why would I be receiving this? And doing kind of those just gut check questions will make it so you say, hey, this really doesn't make sense, and you'll move on. One last poll question, I believe, is, have you ever used Autumn 2020 as a password? A, yes. B, no. And when they say Autumn 2020, they mean, have you ever used a season and year convention for a password?
And Max, while folks are answering that, I did get a question about passwords. Says some people save passwords in their contacts. Can you speak about the risks involved with that?
Some people. So actually, I'm about to get right into that. That said, I think that it's really always best to be saving passwords in a secure application, like a LastPass, be an example. Okay, well, we have mostly no, but we had a couple yes, and don't worry, guys, there's always a few yeses. Continuing that and going right into passwords and multi-factor, Karen, if your phone is protected with a thumbprint and all of those things, that is great to have that security level. But, it is very easy to gain access to someone's phone typically. And again, if someone has brought down a bad application or whatever, definitely, even more potential. So that said, I would, at the bottom here, which we do tell people to consider using a password manager. And then, and whether that be a Dashlane or a LastPass, there's a lot of different ones. I don't have a specific recommendation. Feel free to vet them out. Look at the user reviews. But, to then save all of your passwords onto that and, have that in a secure application with, password protected, maybe also with a fingerprint, then I would really feel comfortable with passwords being saved on the phone. But short of that, it's really not too much better than writing it down on a sticky and sticking it under your computer. Now, that said, for passwords, we really, 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 really want to push for multi-factor authentication, right? Which is, again, having that code sent via text or call when you've logged into your email or sensitive data. Just adding that second layer of protection. Because as we've already touched on, the cyber criminals are opportunistic, for the most part. And if it's that much harder to get into your information, then they will move on. That said, in terms of actual passwords, we're looking for them to be long and strong, complex. We do want the foreign related words at least 15 characters long with numbers and special characters, or a converted phrase with 10 characters long, upper and lower case. We want to avoid this, the ambiguous characteristics like $ and password. Unfortunately, that's really still just password, right? And then we want to avoid names, patterns, and sequences. That's why we asked our autumn 2020 question, because almost every organization has someone that does make their password because they are required to change it every 90 days per IT, season and year, right? So many people around the nation and globe will probably make their password winter 2021, or winter 2020, if they haven't already, coming right up here. So that's why we want to avoid that. We also just want to avoid, in general, names, patterns, sequences. If we tweet about the fact that we go on walks with our dog Polly every day because we're working from home, well, we don't want every password to be Polly123. I actually even recently read about the cyber criminals utilizing SEO tactics. So they're going to people's social medias pages and what have you, and then using SEO tools to show what keywords they use the most, and then running brute force attacks with those words in hopes that some of them make up passwords. So all the more reason to really kind of get out of the things that we would normally rely on, or things that we like, or things that are obvious in terms of passwords. And then, of course, don't use the same password at multiple sites where we have protected or sensitive information. And that's simply because then your battleship is sunk across the board, right? We don't want to put... Oh, sorry about that, guys. We don't want every password to be the same, because, again, when we're playing Battleship, we spread out our ships in hopes of lasting in the game longer, right? So just make sure we're not doing that as well. And then that does lead me back to just consider using that password manager. And this will, many of these applications or password managers will generate these long, complex passwords for us, and then store them. And that way we don't need to remember them, and we just simply need to gain, access that when we're going to log into these things. Other things just to be aware of is acceptable use, especially if you are working remotely and you've brought your work computers home, thinking about the sites that we're navigating to. We're now on our Wi-Fi, maybe it's not as restricted, maybe kids are jumping on there, and just know that it can be as easy as visiting a website and to bring down malware without clicking or doing anything other than going to that site. So it's why we really, again, just need to utilize mindful use and think about where we're navigating to. This is really just hammering that multi-factor thing home, right? Always enable that multi-factor authentication, and then never, ever, ever share that multi-factor authentication code. Again, that's another big scam that's being utilized, is someone will call, will start that process of a password reset or whatever it is. They have enough information that will send a message off to your personal device. You'll receive a text message code, and then maybe you'll receive a call either right before that or right after it, saying, hey, we're calling from such and such institution. Can you please read the code we've just sent you, right? And so for that reason, you're never going to be asked to share that. And then the other piece is, if you do receive this multi-factor code and you have not initiated the process, you now know to contact the help desk or contact that organization, as well as to update your password immediately, because you know that some layer has been messed with and someone is trying to gain access to your systems. For video conferencing, because that has become even more popular as we are engaging in together right now, we just want to make sure that we're setting passwords for online meetings, setting individual meet times, not just leaving platforms open all day, because we have heard tales of people jumping on when they aren't supposed to, either for inappropriate reasons or to gain knowledge that they shouldn't have access to, right? Double checking our invitation lists, making sure that these are vetted and allowed in our environment. Can we be utilizing Zoom? Has that been okayed? Just really important to take the extra step, especially when we're having not necessarily these types of engagements, but if we're engaging in confidential conversations about clients or whatever it may be. Ensuring that we do have antivirus in the latest updates. Again, and this goes for your mobile devices, but also your PCs, your Macs, your laptops. Bringing this down because it's just incredibly important. I know up here we have Spectrum, and as a result, they actually offer McAfee Security Suite for free. And so, go to your cable providers and see, internet providers, and see if there is a service being offered like that, because many of them do. terms of unacceptable use, remembering to lock down our Wi-Fi and how important that is, right? Change the default name of your home Wi-Fi. Don't keep it as Spectrum 5.4, right? That generic, make it something specific to you. Make your wireless network password strong and unique. Can't emphasize that enough. Enabling that different network encryption that'll give you options to do. Turning off your network name broadcasting, especially if you're in a really populated area, so that people aren't just trying to connect to you and then able to gain access to your network. Making sure your router software is up to date, and for that matter, logging into your router. Many people will at home right now, or will go home and look at their router, and you'll read that the password is admin and the login is admin and has never been updated. And this is really very important to do, and it's also where you can set up your encryption and make sure certain things are on and not on. Make sure your router software is up to date. Make sure you have a good firewall. Again, oftentimes you can enable your firewall once you've logged into your router. And then whenever possible, utilizing your VPN access into your network, and that'd be into your organization's network. VPN is virtual private network. So working with your help desk to get a VPN client on your machine so that you are browsing securely, and then all of those tools that we would normally have on our environment will be, again, once you've connected. Almost done here. Keeping our desk clean, so we don't have confidential information unattended, even when we're working from home, right? Because with kids and the chaos of life, we don't want these documents swept up with other things. So for that reason, have a confidential destruction bin, and this can be utilized also for personal information. Whether you get something from a financial institution or a medical bill, and disposing of those things properly. Also, knowing your organization's policies and procedures, knowing where these live, knowing what is expected and accepted, and understand that these should be living and breathing documents if you're in charge of these in your institution. And then reporting anything to your IT or help desk, right? If something comes up out of the ordinary, if you don't feel like you're working securely, if you think you may have clicked on a phishing email or brought something down, don't close the laptop and say, "Oof, hopefully nothing comes from that." Report it, own up to it, because it's okay. We're gonna make those mistakes. It's gonna happen, but it's getting ahead of it and mitigating the risk right away. And then participating in training and continuing to get education like we're doing right now, right? Training is about answers and about how to do it. Education is about questions, about why to do it. I just have this slide up, and we're really pressing against time, and I want to get to everyone's questions, but these are me, dressed up in different uniforms, again, pretending to be a vendor. Some of them you might recognize, right? Konica Minolta and AT&T. And I can tell you, I'm talking not just from an abstract. I've walked into organizations and gained access to their data centers by simply putting on an AT&T shirt and holding a clipboard and using the right words. But I can also tell you that if anyone were to have ever said, wait, we're not expecting you, or called the right person, or called AT&T, or Googled my fictitious companies, right, Safe Electric, or my exterminator company, Bugbusters, and they wouldn't have found any evidence of that organization, and could have turned everything I was trying to make happen into vapor. I have one example of a woman. I was able to gain access to an organization. I simply just printed off the words vendor and the company's logo. I got up to the second floor. The second floor receptionist, immediately said, no, you need to sign in downstairs, because that was their policy and procedure, to which I just pointed at my badge and said, well, where do you think I got this? She said, oh, okay, you must be fine. And then I was on my way, and I walked by a woman who I didn't take any notice of, but as I was about to be brought to a server room in the electrical room by a gentleman and begin putting USBs into people's workstations when they weren't paying attention, a woman came running down the hall screaming, "It's not a real badge!" Because she had overheard the conversation between the receptionist, and she didn't think it felt right. The badge didn't look normal to her. Vendors were normally escorted. And, right in that moment, she collapsed my entire pretext. And because she said something and spoke up, that would have, if I was a real cyber criminal, would have ended that process. Now, of course, that escalated a little quickly because I had a letter explaining who I was, and I unfortunately kept it in my inner coat pocket. As I was rummaging for it, when I looked up, both of these two individuals' hands were up, and the one woman was crying. But we were on the same team, so it was good. Now, again, you might not feel comfortable, going up to that person, but we can always report that person, or feel comfortable asking them for their badge, or telling them they have to wait until we get authorization. And the same goes for the phishing email or the robocall. But between it, if we click on it on accident, report it. If we think it's weird and just strange to see, report that too. We can make all of these things into vapor together. So lastly, does your organization provide cybersecurity training? A, yes, B, no, and C, don't know. Excellent, and that's so great that so many of yours do. It looks like 77% does receive cybersecurity training, which is phenomenal. For those of you that don't, please take this knowledge back to your organization, or reach out to us, and we'll see how we can help you. Ending it with, what did we learn? And the answer really, again, is pay no attention to the man behind the curtain, because so much of this can be turned into vapor, and we now have the tools and, know what to be looking for. And also just always be mindful. Take your extra second, take the time, look at the URLs, think about what you're doing before you click. And know that we're here for you. We're here for you in multiple different ways. We're here to help. Reach out to your sales reps, and we'd love to have a longer conversation of how we can get you on the road to cyber resilience. So thank you so much.
All right. Thank you, Max. So I hope everyone, I hope I lived up to my promises, or Max lived up to my promises, and you had fun and you learned a lot. We go ahead and put questions into the Q&A. We have one here, Max. It says, can you offer any information or insight on the new notification pop-ups on websites regarding cookies?
I can't, honestly, in depth. I know that a lot of that is coming from kind of enhanced regulations on information that's being shared and privacy laws. My general rule of thumb is, if it's a site that you feel safe navigating to say it's a Press Herald site of your local paper, and they're telling you, are you okay with the cookies? Generally, yes, it's safe. It's just really, it just means that they're taking in some of the information that you're giving them by visiting their site. So really, again, kind of use kind of your gut instinct there, and if it's a safe site, then feel comfortable with it. If not, best to avoid it altogether.
All right, thank you. Don't leave yet, everybody, because first and foremost, we have some gift cards to give away. And go ahead, if there are any other questions. There aren't any open questions now, but if anything that you think of comes up, let me know. And just some housekeeping. First of all, in the weeks following the conference, participants are going to receive CPE certificates based on the sessions you attended, as reflected in the Zoom participation reports. And as a reminder, you must be registered and all fees paid through the Institute of Government to receive these credits. Again, I'm going to now go ahead in the chat, put those links up again. One is a link to the sponsor page, one is a link to the exhibitor page, and the last is a link to the evaluation survey. We appreciate your immediate response to the session evaluation survey using that link. And if you're unable to complete the survey at this time, you can access the link on the GGFOA virtual conference webpage at any time throughout the conference. So I know we and the committee appreciates you filling those out. All right, so no other questions. So I would love to go ahead and give away these two $25 Amazon gift cards. And I do have to say that I already have one winner at the beginning when I was asking folks about the weather and who had the highest temperature. Melody Marlowe said she saw a 100-degree readout on a thermometer today. So I think that wins, and 100%, you know, accurate, correct winner. So that's wonderful. Melody, if you could please let me know in the chat where you're from and the best contact information for you, then I know the conference will get you that gift card. And so for the next $25 Amazon gift card, what I would love to know, if you can put in the chat, answer in the chat, what one thing you learned today that you want to immediately go back and implement at your organization. So a little bit of a quick draw in terms of who can get a response first. And all sorts of things coming in. And I know everyone's being fast with real quick answers. A lot of them are on passwords, which is great. Strong passwords, updating passwords more frequently. Learned about the phishing scams. I think that's wonderful. So / and 2 dots back, which is also another good one. So I'm going to go back a little bit and just see one of the initial responses that we got, because they're all great, and thanks everyone for participating. So Deirdre Diggs, strong passwords. Thank you for answering, and I think you win. You definitely do win that second Amazon gift card. So Deirdre, if you can put in where you're from again and the best contact information from you, then you'll get that second Amazon gift card. So I know we've got a couple of minutes left. I got through all the housekeeping. Max, I don't know if you want to give us any more stories of your social engineering to kind of play us out, but we certainly have presented everything we need to at this point.
I mean, I'm happy to, or we can let everybody go. Definitely plenty of stories, and hope to share them all with you in person sometime.
Yeah, Max has some experiences, that's for sure. But thank you, everyone, for participating. Thank you for joining us today. And I hope, I'm not quite sure how much longer the conference is going, but I hope it's very educational for you. And we thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Karen. Thank you, Max. Really appreciate it. A lot of great information there. Really thank you for sharing your knowledge and expertise and making it fun at the same time. As for the conference, we've got one starting up at 10 tomorrow, another one at 2, and then the next, the remainder of October. So lots more to learn. Thanks again, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. Thank you all. That was great. Really appreciate it, Karen and Max.
You got it. Thank you.
Thank you.